who's got it tied up. And there's a lot of properties around. You go around the north side of the city and how they're growing and stuff. And the reason why the growth isn't taking place where they intended it to be taking place is because somebody else has come along and has gotten control of the asset, and because they don't have the resources to do anything with it, it's shut down. And that doesn't serve the community's interest. So I want to, before we get to a point of actually signing something in turn, it's not costing us anything right now. It's bare land. It's not like a bunch of derelict buildings. And so from a property management point of view, I just want to make sure that when we do get to a point of transferring it to, let's find a legitimate property owner and developer who has the means and the wherewithal to do what they say they're going to do and not just be pie in the sky. We've been burned too many times that way. And I'm not interested in the county being the agent to do that, because they've demonstrated, the inability to really make that happen. There's enough war stories there, so I mean, don't even have to go there. We're on the same page with that one.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, you're right, this isn't costing us anything right now at this time and period. And rather than just sell all of it at once in one fell swoop, I think that we might be missing the boat a little bit, and I think we need to sell just half of it. I mean, sell the long finger, but just sell half of the airport up there on the M2 industrial, split, draw a line going east-west, something like that there, and either sell the top half or the bottom half. You got the road coming in from the access road up there by the railroad tracks. Have the bottom half be one parcel, the top half be the other, and then just come out here on the back end and split it over again, is my thought. And because out there and just sell half of it, save that one parcel, save half the airport property. So now I think I don't know how it's gonna work out long-term in the future, but whoever owns that has to go through the county, and I don't know, we probably ought to save 10 acres of it ourselves just for county-owned land, because I don't know if we're gonna have to be responsible for emergency response, putting up the air tower, the snow removal, sand removal, whatever. And so,
Snow removal?
well, I don't know, whatever may come along, but the maintenance, I guess, the maintenance equipment there would be. So,
Maintenance
that's
equipment for what, man?
for the airport and or the roads going in and out. Of the airport. I don't know, because we have to work with the Army on this, and everybody has to go through the county.
I say get rid of it all and be done with
Well, I think we just still need to sell half of it now, and then sell half of it later.
it. I think get rid of it all and be done with it.
What I might suggest, there's this little parcel right here, and it's hard to say what's gonna happen in the future if the county needed a road shop or something like that out there. That might not be, I don't think that's gonna impact the value of what we're gonna get for the rest of it. It's kind of an odd parcel close to town, next to Page Put.
38 acres.
That might be,
If there's something that we think we might legitimately need, and it makes sense, and it doesn't compromise a potential investor, then by sure all means,
I think that might fit that description. I mean, I can't think of a specific use for it, but you don't know what's gonna happen in that community in 20 or 50 years either.
Well, would we need anything at the airport to, I don't know, the fuel tanks, the air control tower? I mean, if this thing takes off and blooms, I'm just asking, I mean, because everybody, whoever owns that has
That's
to
gonna
come
be
to
a
the
private
county.
project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not gonna have anything to do with that.
Our role,
We'll fall
I
back
think,
on
would
us.
be facilitating
Yeah.
joint use of the airstrip. I guess we could do what we wanted to do in terms of how much we wanted to be involved in that.
Do you want to be involved in a $5 million fuel depot? Or how about a $20 million IFR tower?
I just didn't know what our responsibility was gonna be, is what is my point.
If we sell it and get rid of it, we don't have any responsibility.
more did you have?
Pete,
Well, we have a good
not even with
point.
the Army?
Huh?
Not even with the Army?
How do we have responsibility on it?
Yeah, one thing to think about too in terms of access is the finger has this road somewhere. It's not a surveyed road. And so
There's a dirt road there.
if you split it up, you want to have access, deeded access, and we don't know where that is. So there's a couple options. You could survey the road, or you could say 300 feet from the property line. But my point is that, you know, access is an issue, especially if you separate the finger parcel. So it's something to think about when disposing of the property.
So, thank you. If the board, I'm personally in favor of offering it for sale, if the staff, and more specifically Richard, if you think it's important that we keep that acreage, I would, personally, I think that's a good idea. And then do the, whatever, the title work, put it for sale, and let's see what comes. If nothing comes, there's nothing wasted, you know, and if we get offers like, Jim, you said that the board's not comfortable with, we just keep it, we try again in a year, or 2
Yeah.
years.
Let me throw another strategy, and this is the time to do it, because there's no parties involved, we don't have any parties. If you sell the entire parcel to one person, now you've created basically a non-competitive environment. One person has control. And one of the things I hear about the private sector all the time, what they're proud of, is the competitive environment. So maybe what we do in order to not have all the eggs in one basket is by creating, you know, 2 or 3 sections up there along the airstrip and provide for competition within the private sector. So you sell one piece to one entrepreneur, another piece to another entrepreneur, and they can work together or they can work at each other. But the way you keep prices down and costs down and stuff is when you have a competitive environment, when you have a exclusive type of an arrangement. In this case, one person owning all 3,000 acres, it's like creating a monopoly. And what kind of effect does that have on on the business climate for the county? So I think, we talk about the future economic development of and we want to see that, all of us do. Do we want to do it in a competitive environment, or do we want it to be non-competitive? And there's serious ramifications to both. And so we can, that's a philosophical policy thing. It has nothing to do with who the prospective owners could be. And I think that's something, if we're going to be at this stage, that would be the time to determine it. So,
as maybe a compromise on that idea is maybe splitting it up into components, but allowing proponents to propose on any or all of it. Whereas, if the best proponent wants to buy it all, then they get it all. But if somebody wants to get part of it, they just take part of it.
well,
Just
maybe
to
some
throw
people,
out there.
maybe some people aren't big enough to be able to buy it all, but they might be big enough to buy a part of it and do something creative with it.
One caveat to that, though, is that if we do break it up, like Mr. Anderson suggested, we're going to have to deal with the access. We offer it all as one. We don't have to deal with access because they can put it wherever they want to. But if we have it isolated properties up here, we're going to have to somehow ensure that each one has appropriate access.
This kind of reminds me of this way of thinking, I mean, and no, I don't mean any disrespect at all by it, but it reminds me of sort of what happened to the LRA. Because I know there was people interested, and I know firsthand, because I know Tom was interested, we've known each other a long time, approaching the old, regime out there, and the same thing, wanting a fortune for stuff. Doing all this, like splitting it, and and I mean, Jim, you even mentioned earlier, like the county, like the guys are trying to wheel and deal property, like Donald Trump's. I mean, that's kind of reminds me of that. Let's put it for sale. Let's see who comes to the table. If we don't like the players, let's keep it. It doesn't cost us anything. If we get nobody serious, and if we're not sure we're gonna get, let's negotiate. Let's try and keep a piece of the pie down the road as far as, get some, what tax things. I mean, if we get the right people, the slate is blank to negotiate. And we need to make it clear like that no matter, we have the right to refuse anything. And also that if we do accept somebody, then the opportunity is to further explore a, long-term, tax or those type of agreements. And And maybe we don't. Odds are we don't get the right person, but until we start putting it out there, even if we do it annually or biannually, sooner or later, the guy's gonna show up, so hopefully.
Well, let's, I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, and no disrespect is received, but, nor is it intended to give back, but as it comes down to it, when you do it as one package, and it's, we have to decide where we wanna go for. We can go with one big guy who takes care of it all, or we can look at maybe some of the medium-sized players. I mean, if Tom was, in order to get his hands on the little gas house deli, had to acquire the entire LA property, he would have gone like this here, because all he's interested in is the gas house deli. So I'm saying is, do you create opportunities for the small or medium-sized entrepreneurs to compete for, a piece of the action, or you just deal exclusively with one big person? And the easiest would be to go with the big person, but I mean, and then they can break it up, or they can include who they want or exclude who they don't want, and, and they, make their fortune based on that. I mean, that's fine, but the issue comes down to is of creating opportunity, and I think that there's got to be more than one entrepreneur out there who would have an interest, but some of them aren't going to have the means to do the big size, and I would like to see the Toms of the world have a crack at least part of it, if not, whatever.
So, thank you. I'm gonna, let the public weigh in, and then I think we need to get a pulse on which way we wanna go, so we can move forward one way or another. So, Spencer.
And I'm just throwing this out, we picked somebody for Herlong, and I've talked to Richard about this, about no financial statement was asked for. So even though Mr. Pizzullo and Larry Smith and Hal Hayes are no names, no financial statement was required to see if they in fact have $2 million, have $3 million liquid to go in there and do what they said they were going to do. That's come and gone, but given supporting your point and Mr. Chapman's point is, that's a lot, that's 3,000 acres, that's not 348 acres, that's almost 4,000 acres. It would be smart to include a financial statement in this, because like Mr. Chapman says, you might come in with all this, I can do this, I can walk on water, and they don't have any liquidity. So it would be a really good idea to include in this RFP, if you're going to issue it, to require a financial statement. I mean, that's a big deciding factor.
That is a good point.
I mean, that's all good, that's fine, I have no problem if they want to put that, but that's more when you develop the RFP, what you're going to put in it. I strongly believe in capitalism. First of all, 3,000 acres of nothing isn't worth a lot. 0 times 0 is 0. So I mean, if this was 3,000 acres around Susanville, yes. Out there along the lake shore, it's basically worthless. So I don't think it's going to take a lot of money to buy it. And I believe, you put it out to bid. What the guy's going to do, it's up to him. It's not our issue to sell it to only the guy that says he's going to do this. I'm a capitalist. You put it out for bid, let the guys bid, whoever bids the highest price, they own it.
Did you feel that way about Herlong when you sold Herlong? You don't care what the person does, or just let him buy it and you don't care what he does with it?
Well, that's a little,
Let's keep to this.
let's keep it to this, that's a little different, but that was involving more of a community oriented. This is a lot of greasewood, salt grass, alkali, a lot of nothing on most of it except up by the airstrip. And still, the ground around the airstrip, could be a potential business site for, freight moving by aircraft. But basically, yes. I believe that, in a capitalistic society, if you want something that goes out to bid, you buy it. And whoever makes the highest bid, I don't care if it's a truckload of cows, a truckload of hay, if it's a truckload of logs, if it's property. The market is established by the highest bidder, not what somebody's big dream is.
One of the things I'd like to see, rather than maybe on this one here, maybe rather than just go to the highest bidder, you know, you look at the whole proposal on what maybe what their plans are and their ideas are, so if there's some subjectivity in this, you're just not going with the high bidder, you're going with a guy maybe that has the best ideas or something like that, so it pulls weight in there more so than just the high value bid.
You get a guy who maybe gives you a high bid and his plan is to do nothing versus a guy who gives you a lower bid but wants to do something.
But I agree, but that does get a little tricky in that trying to hold people to their dreams or aspirations. For instance, somebody comes in and says, I'm gonna locate FedEx, UPS, and the United States Postal Service there.
Walmart's gonna do a distribution center.
And, yeah, a Walmart distribution center, and in 5 years, they haven't done it. What,
Well, that's,
if there's enforcement mechanisms, we need to identify what those are, but, you know, anybody can come and tell us they're gonna do great things.
And how many people are standing in line right now wanting this property? How many people want to come in and develop with all these big developments? I mean, zero, and if I'm wrong, set me correct. Nobody, because it's worthless, and
It's worthless as long as you don't have an agreement or arrangement with the Army.
right, but I mean,
That needs to be
exactly,
put in
that makes it
the
more
RFP.
worthless. But if you put all these restrictions on it, if you buy it, we want a business plan to put this, and this, I guarantee you won't get any bids. You're making it so complicated and involved, these people say, hell with them, we're not gonna touch that. I mean, 90% of it's nothing but Honey Lake, Alkali Lake Shore. On a wet year, the water could be clear up there.
Why don't you just give it away then?
What?
Why don't you just give it away?
I said, put it out to public bid, public auction. That's how American capitalistic society we do things.
If it's
and
worthless,
Eileen,
give it away.
don't talk until you, unless you recognize for the chair, that goes for you and anyone else. Thank you. Okay, so anyhow, pleasure of the board, correct me if I'm wrong, seems to be to do, and I'm just gonna state it as I think, and then correct me if I'm wrong, to do the title, deal, to, get a draft RFP that either does or does not include that piece, if you think the county might need it, and, I think that's step one. I don't think we need to figure out everything today, but I think that's the general consensus that we should, not from everybody, I said general. Believe me, Aaron, I know the pitfalls of a five-man board. Anyway, just joking.
Start throwing that.
There's a good and a bad to it, buddy. There's, anyhow, is that the majority? Just feel like that?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be worthwhile for us to do something, but just having it just sitting there doing nothing,
Absolutely.
you know, except collecting dust on the wall, you know, does not do us any good. So how we go about dealing with it is, you know, another thing. But I do feel that, you know, it's aggravating me that all these assets or properties came into our hands with the intent that they're gonna be distributed early on, and 10 years later, you know, they're just sitting there.
We are in consensus to sell most of it. We're not consensus to sell all of it.
Thank you for articulating.
Maybe Mr. Albaugh can use his discretionary fund and buy a portion of it.
Okay, so when do you think we
You
can
call it all
have
properties.
We can draft the RFP without the benefit of the title report
a look at it?
and finalize that, I think, pending the title report, and then maybe release the RFP in 2 months, is that what?
Well, I think it's premature to set the date to release it right now. Let's
Right.
just get one and look at it, and then at the next meeting,
So-
try to set a date. I think we wanna make sure we're all comfortable with it, but then, and again, either, can we leave it up to Richard, whether he thinks we need to carve out that little piece or not?
I'll just discuss that with county staff and make a recommendation.
And just to make things easier in the future, I still like Maury's idea of consolidating to a bunch of lot line adjustments, so even if it does sell to one property, that up there around the airport is split up so that later on in the future, if somebody does wish to
I'll
desire.
take that little
To sell.
panhandle thing and instead of having it cobbled up in 15 different parcels, so you have, is this 170 property, or is it, I mean, all the different
Well,
B2
but-
properties and whatever, just make it one piece.
But wait a minute, just because they're separate assessors parcels has nothing to do with legal parcels.
Right, yeah, I have.
This may all be one legal parcel, or maybe 1,000.
I think we ought to take the pencil away from the assessor, because they're just having way too much fun out there drawing lines that confuse everybody.
I would be in favor of spending as little staff time and county resources as possible, so I wouldn't be in favor of lot line adjustments
No.
or
Me either.
APNs.
Let the potential buyer to go that way.
Unless you wanna be in the land management business, I don't think any of us do.
Okay, I think.
Thank you, I think we have adequate direction.
Okay, thank
Clear as
you,
mud, Richard, clear as mud.
and thank you for your comments. Okay, I believe there's the one item left, is the H1. Oh, no, I'm sorry, we gotta go to the time served, 1:30 sheriff. Item D4.
Mr. Chairman, John Mino, I'm the sheriff of New Grouse and Sheriff's Corner. We bring this back as a follow-up for further information to the board after we daylighted some of CDCR's interest to talk about reopening a new contract facility and the potential there for the bed space we have available in what is now the vacant of the former CCF. So we worked with county admin. We tried to put together a far more detailed budget, just so the board would have pretty hard numbers to look at, to weigh out. On your face sheet there, you will see we developed a series of startup costs, and while these startup costs are considerably less than the first time we did this, because we don't need things like bunks and we don't need things like hot carts and all the kitchen appliances and everything else, you can see there's still pretty significant startup costs. Everything from the blankets to the bedding to the clothing to shirts and shoes and boots and everything that it takes to outfit these inmates once they get in our custody. The next thing you'll see there is nursing coverage. CDC has indicated that the items there with an asterisk on the first page, you will find the corresponding explanation on the second page, but I'll run those down real quick. We expect that we need at least a few months of nursing. CDC has indicated that they will not ship an inmate to us until they have confirmation that nurses are boots on the ground and ready to serve those inmates right away. So knowing that has to happen first, then the very next step would be to start populating that building with our own folks. And that's going to be all the civilian and all of the peace officer staff it's going to take to staff it. And we would estimate a couple of months there because of all the training costs, or all the training that has to take place. And it just doesn't make sense to start something like this up and not get out ahead of the training. Every CO that goes to work for us has to go to the 176-hour basic core course. They have to go to the basic 832, which is the powers of arrest course that post requires. They're also going to have to, the lion's share of them are going to have to go through the 24-hour course about use of force and firearms. And there's an additional CDCR orientation course that talks about all of the specific CDCR rules that govern housing their inmates. There are two different sets of rule books, gentlemen. When we ran both of these facilities in tandem, there is a Title 15 in the California Code of Regulations, Division 1 that governs county jail inmates, and then Division 3 governs CDCR inmates. So we have to be able to functionally operate in two simultaneous rule books on opposite ends of the building. So that CDCR course is an important part of the startup cost. So you can see there our estimate right now for preliminary startup costs would be approximately $361,000. And then you can see the ongoing costs that trail. If CDC were to give us $60 per day per bed for all 128 beds, it's about $2.8 million. You can see the operating costs on the next line, still on page 1, about $3 million, which would create an operating deficit for the CCF of just shy of $200,000. So clearly, if you look at the CCF in a vacuum, what would the CCF budget be versus what would the revenues be? This would make no sense at all because it's a $200,000 deficit. But having done this before, we know we gain some benefits there co-locating a CCF side by side with the county jail. That's the next line you see. By sharing some of the costs or being able to offset some of the existing jail costs, We estimate that would be approximately $427,000 worth of jail offsets. So at the top of the next page, you can see that if you look at those two programs in tandem, we would estimate that that's about a $232,000 revenue on top of operating costs if we look at the jail and the CCF together. Now, there are, I won't say a lot of caveats, but clearly there are some caveats. We talked about the first two bullet points about the nursing and the startup costs. The next one with the three bullets there, there's no guaranteed minimum in this proposed contract. As we've said before, CDC is willing to talk about per head per day. We've already told them this would have to be per bed per day, but they have yet to tell us what that minimum would look like. We can tell you today that one of the other publics that is a lot farther down the tracks than we are was able to get CDC to commit to 90% as a minimum. So 90% of beds, if we deduct that out, the problem for us is that if they stuck us at 90% and left us there, that would bring us down to about 2.5 million. So 2.5 million against the $3 million operating budget, even considering the jail offsets, we're already in the red. So that number is not going to pencil for us. The 90% minimum is just plainly not going to get it done.
At a higher rate, could you make that pencil?
Yes, now so far, and again, early on,
Sorry,
right, but no, I agree with you, Tom, but so far they have said 60 is the high-end cap. Now, we haven't gone back, they haven't seen this yet. We wanted the board to see this first before we went back to them and said this, as to where, how this does or doesn't pencil. The next piece of this, of course, there are, obviously, as you well know, there are a lot of things that make this a moving target. We have, all of the MOUs are going to be coming up for negotiation moving ahead. We know pension reform factors into that. That does help drive some of the costs down. Anyone that we hire from this point forward would end up being a pension reform person. So there are some cost savings built in. But as we move ahead and not knowing what lies out there, as you start working with the bargaining groups for any kind of boosts in healthcare contributions or pay increases or incentives or any of the like, isn't factored into this. Obviously, that's just something that we can't guess. We can guess with pretty good certainty. The last time we did this, trying to get cost of living adjustments out of them was difficult. We spent our last 5 or 6 amendments to that contract really scraping by trying to get some kind of bump, some kind of CPI adjustment. We just never could get that done. Don't know yet if that's going to be allowable on the front side to build that right in. That if we're going to do this, we have to start here, we have to have a guaranteed minimum here, and we have to be guaranteed X% per year of COLA, so to speak.
The one thing though is that they're the ones that need the bed space, not us. So, if they're not willing to give us those kind of considerations, then I would say we just take off the table them having access. They can look around the rest of the state and hopefully they can put together what they need for the courts. They're operating on an 18-month clock with some benchmarks in which they have to perform. So I think at this point in time, based on that one article, and last Thursday, I listened in by phone to the CSAC board meeting. There was the assistant secretary or understanding this within corrections is the guy that's handling the court, mandated contract. I mean, in terms of dealing with the negotiations, gave a very interesting presentation. And they're turning over every rock, looking for every opportunity to. And the courts have told them they can't farm a lot of these people out of state anymore. If anything, you have to start reeling those people back in so they can be more in a sphere of control. And he basically, it kind of boiled down to their push come to shove. They've got about 4,400 beds is what they're dealing with, that they've got to crack that nut between now and when this 18-month clock runs out. And it was pretty interesting. So I think they're in a much greater need to have something done. So cost-wise, there's costs being put to them, and they're paying exorbitant healthcare bills. I know that some of the costs that we've heard and read about is just outrageous, but I mean, if they're succumbing to that, why can't they give us a decent, not expect us to operate with 194,541 in the red in terms of rate. That should be like a zero, so that whatever cost savings that we're able to generate by doing our in-house stuff like that gives us a little bit of cushion to deal with the unexpected. And believe me, there will be some unexpected. And it won't take long before that 232,551 disappears.
Agreed. Now the next piece of this, 232 combined is certainly worth worth talking about. But the other things that are worth talking about is we lived and really enjoyed the benefits of a blended staffing pattern once before. And it's impossible to put a dollar figure on that. If we have if this comes to fruition, we have 4 people that are dedicated and now working in the CCF, and a combative booking walks into intake. 3 of those people are instantly there to augment our jail staffing to help through that critical event. If we have a